everyone! If you're anything like me, sometimes all you want is a short book to just sit down with a cup of coffee for a couple of hours, read the whole thing, feel very accomplished that you finished the book, and yet have a really good and interesting reading experience. Today I'm going to recommend to you 10 books under 200 pages. So the first book I want to recommend to you is Why God is a Woman by Nan Andrews. And this was recommended to me by one of my best friends, Lucia. I will link her channel down in the description box. This book is a collection of poetic prose, and it's set on an island where women rule. This is told from the perspective of a boy who has been exiled from that island, and he is telling us what it's like to live on the island where he came from. This is only 88 pages. I highly recommend this book, even if you like long books as well, because this should be read by everyone. It is just a masterpiece of a book. The second book I want to recommend to you is the famous We Should All Be Feminist by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. So this is the text of Chimamanda's TED Talk a couple of years ago, and it is just a must read for everybody. Not just women, men, anyone. In this, she tells us how she started identifying as a feminist and why we should all do the same. This book is only 48 pages, and look, it's tiny. You can definitely read it really quickly, but you have the option of actually watching Chimamanda's video. I will link it down in the description box below because it's really worth it, and she is just a lovely woman. So the third book I want to recommend to you is The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. Angela Carter is just amazing. She doesn't need any recommendation from me, but I will do it all the same. The Bloody Chamber is a short story collection of retellings of fairy tales, of famous fairy tales, from a more feminist point of view. All the fairy tales in this are much darker, and they deal more openly with women's sexuality. It's feminist, but feminist doesn't even cover it. It's just wonderful, and everyone should read it. Angela Carter is amazing. The fourth book I want to recommend to you is a poetry collection, and that is And Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou is a force of nature, and her strength and power translates into words beautifully. It's a lot about like women's experiences, and especially black women's experiences in life. The language is not difficult in this, so if you're not used to reading poetry, I think this is a good one to start with because it's very accessible. With only 125 pages is Treats by Laura Williams. This book is a collection of short stories about life in the 21st century, and it is a treat in itself. The language is beautiful, the stories are so relatable, they're too relatable perhaps. I loved it. I think I read it in a day, just like dipping in and out, and it was a wonderful experience, and I really highly recommend it. Some of the short stories here are precious. I love it. Next book is sort of a graphic novel, sort of like comic strip kind of thing, and it's The Trouble with Women by Jackie Fleming. I'm sure lots of you have seen this, like doing the rounds on BookTube, and it deals with women's lives in the 19th century and how they were perceived, because it plays with the idea that before that we didn't really hear of women in history books, so they didn't exist probably. And I love that. I love the fact that it says, well, in the 19th century when we started hearing about women, those are examples of the early women. It's very satirical, ironic at times. It's such a quick read, and it has gems such as the image of Queen Victoria. I don't know if you can see it properly, but it says Queen Victoria was herself a rare example of early woman, shown here holding something unaided. It's brilliant and a lot of fun. So keeping with the theme of early women, I have here The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This is only 59 pages. It's a really short novella which deals with the story of this woman who is isolated after giving birth in this room covered by yellow wallpaper. So this book for me speaks of women's mental health and its relation to the oppression society inflicts upon them, especially in the 19th century when everything for women was so restrictive. So this book is a must-read for any feminist or for anyone who is interested in women's history, women's mental health, and how those two things correlated, because this is just fantastic. Jane Eyre is one of my favorite books of all time. But don't worry, I'm not about to recommend Jane Eyre in a video about short books, but I am going to recommend to you Wild Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys. This tells the story of Bertha, Rochester's wife, the mad woman in the attic, before she met Rochester, during their courtship, and afterwards when she goes to England to live there. It is both a post-colonialist treasure and also a feminist treasure. So if you're interested in either, read this. Also, this will complement Jane Eyre in a really lovely way, because in Jane Eyre we never get Bertha's side of the story. And let's face it, she was trapped in an attic by her husband. It's clearly not a happy story. And the second last book I'm going to show you, with only 193 pages, so almost there in the limit, is The Penelope by Marga Ettwood. This is part of the Canongate Myth series, which was a project created to adapt myths and classics to the modern reader by contemporary authors. This book tells Penelope's version of the Odyssey. So this book deals mostly with gender and double standards, but also with the idea of, well, who gets to tell your story at the end. So that's why Penelope is the one telling the story here. She finally gets to tell us her side of things. Even though it wasn't on purpose, I am aware that so far I've only mentioned books written by women. So just so you don't say, ooh, you don't read books by men, I do avoid reading books by men, that is true. The next novel is by a male author, one of my favorites, and it's fantastic, because really, who says men can't write? And that is Ian McEwan's Untitled Beach. I read a couple of other works by Ian McEwan, but after reading this, it quickly became my favorite. It's only 166 pages. It's a very quick read. I read it in a day, and this tells the story of this couple on their wedding night and all the unsaid things between them. And there is so much that they don't say. As always with Ian McEwan, the writing is beautiful, and I couldn't recommend this more. So if you haven't read any of Ian McEwan's novels, I think Untitled Beach is a great way to start, because not only is it a short novel, it is also brilliant. And I love it so much. So I hope you liked this video, everyone, and do let me know in the comments down below if you have read any of the books I recommended. Also, let me know if you have any recommendations for more books under 200 pages, because I do love a short book. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and see you next time. Bye!